SAU 21 Joint School Board meeting. Would you please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight is the reorganization meeting for the school board. But before we do that, I want to just take a moment to go around and welcome folks and let everyone introduce themselves because we have some new members here. So we'll start with Lauren.
Okay, Lauren Jardow, I'm from Southampton.
Hi, Tricia O'Keefe, Winnicott School Board.
Leslie LaFond, Winnicott.
Barbara Goodman, Hampton Falls.
Anthony Lang, Hampton Falls.
I'm one of the newbies.
Welcome.
I am Wendy Wallace, Northampton. Ashley Haas, Northampton.
Michael Jeffrey, Northampton.
Lisa DeGalis, Northampton. Oh, sorry. Oh my God.
She's not
All I'm saying.
Oh,
I figured every PG was she was. Kate Belanger, Northampton Board.
Patrick Knott, Seabrook School Board.
Kelly Seabrook School Board.
Jen Hubbard, Seabrook School Board.
Maria Brown, Seabrook School Board. Oldie but newbie, right, Leslie?
There you go.
That's
Right.
All right, so the first order of business is to appoint a chair. So I will be looking for nominations.
Am I able to ask a question beforehand?
Sure.
So I know that Seabrook's up. I just wanted, in light of the this kind of duality of what's going on in Seabrook, I just wanted to know how you're going to approach, being joint board chair and having an exploratory committee at the same time to lead the SAU.
Right now, it's just the fact-finding mission, basically the same thing Hampton did. I think, as far as I'm concerned, we're still operating under the guys that were part of the SAU. So I don't personally see it as a conflict. I think, but if everyone else does, let us know. It still runs the same until we have numbers and everyone knows how long that takes, so.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of just like to piggyback on what Patrick said. So it's a committee, informational, and actually Rio Tilton, the moderator for the school, is going to be nominating the 4 community members. Our board will work together to see who will serve. But it's not, I don't think it interferes with our board obligations.
Okay.
Can I ask, I have a couple questions, you go first. Yeah, can I just ask a general question, Meredith? Maybe you might be the person to answer this. Can you just run through what the board chair or the joint board chair does? Like what that role entails and what it looks like and what they'd be responsible for?
Sure, and Leslie, feel free to chime in, right? You're the one who served in that
I'm
role,
last man standing.
Well, I think I think you're the one who served in that role.
Early.
So obviously the joint chair runs joint board meetings.
Yeah.
The joint chair is the person I report to over if I'm planning to take vacation days. That's part of my contract. The joint board chair typically chairs the OC meetings, which is where the agenda is set, and is a person I reach out to if there's a major SAU issue to start that process of communicating with other board members.
Right.
I just think
I think the joint board chair works closely with the superintendent, I mean, I think that's, and it's a relationship that, I think is pretty strong and pretty tight. So, yeah, I understand, and I understand that too, and I don't want to put Seabrook in a position if you're not comfortable like that. So, I mean, and if you are, great, like, no issues whatsoever. But it's just if there's a conflict of interest is I think probably would be the biggest thing, is because that chair does work closely with the superintendent. So that would be my biggest thing. But if you guys are fine with that, then.
Yeah, I think at this stage of the game where it just got passed by voters just to form the committee, the openings for the community members at large, whatever, to fill that committee still hasn't even hit its deadline yet. And then, like I said, it's just a numbers game. They're gonna pull all the numbers And I don't see how, I know me personally, it won't affect me. I mean, we have to work together through this whole, so we're part of the SAU. Like, it's just a study to see if it'll benefit us or not. It's something the taxpayers have been asking for years, so we put it on the ballot, they approved it, now we just gotta collect all the numbers. But as far as I'm concerned, we're gonna work together with everybody the same way that we have been, so.
Can I ask a question about the motivation to go for the study? You said partially taxpayers been asking. What are some other, like, what are, I guess my only concern is if your motivation was to detach for a variety of reasons, I'd be interested in what they were, just so that I could better understand how, like, what it would be like to navigate both roles, I guess. So the motivation was taxpayer interest.
Taxpayer interest is, I think, one of the big drivers. Everyone else's school in this SAU tests significantly higher than Seabrook. And a lot of the taxpayers and the people that attend the school are asking a lot of questions, and we pay a large sum of money into the SAU. And the biggest question is it worth it for us to be in control of our own school to the taxpayers, to help kind of drive some academic growth? Because, I mean, we are bottomed out. We're one of the lowest in the states, and Northampton, you guys are sitting at like 80th percentiles for math. We're at the 9, 10, 12 percentile. It's hard for parents to take that into account when you're like, we're just 3 miles up Route 1. We're all part of the same SAU, and when our kids hit Winnacunnet, we have been noted to be pretty significantly behind compared to what you guys have been sending. And I know parents are starting to really ask questions, and it's kind of, the gap has widened between the Seabrook product and the rest of the SAU, and I think the parents are now at the point where, like, well, let's at least get the information. They think that it's a potential that we can run it better than the SAU does. It's the same situation that Hampton was in. When you look at the money spent, and then people ask questions, well, why are we spending $690,000 compared to Southampton? I mean, Southampton, you guys, I understand some of the reasoning behind it, but it is it's a big burden, and it's a big question to the taxpayers, and that's why we've gotten a ton of questions about withdrawing. So, like everyone, we have to take what the taxpayers say seriously, so we put it on the ballot, and they approved it. So now we have to just do all the fact-finding missions and see how it'll work out. If anybody else has anything else, but I feel like that's the major concerns that we've had being voiced, is definitely just the disparity between everyone else's scores in academics and ours, and especially when the kids enter the high school, we're behind. We've got kids that can't play sports that first trimester because they're already well behind everyone else. We've got 8th graders reading at 5th grade, 6th grade reading levels or lower, and the parents are sick of it, and they want answers, and this is one of the ways that we can provide answers.
I think in the last school board meeting, I think the last meeting we had here, we kind of explained it too, remember? I don't know if it was all on non-public.
I left it non-public. I left before non-public.
Yeah, maybe that's why. All right, so I don't have a problem repeating it. Basically, our school is turned into not a safe environment. We have students that throw desks. We have students that are in there a couple times, fist fights to the point where after the 3rd or 4th incident, there's no consequences, and we've had a case where a child was strangled. We have parents going to the police department all the time to file charges, and the board knows nothing. There's a ton of situations going on. Things that I have friends that their children go to the schools that you guys are in, and they said none of that would be tolerated. Absolutely, it wouldn't even get to that point. And what he covered basically on the academics part, that's correct. But it's also a part of our school is not safe. Kids are afraid to go to school. We have to have bus monitors now that the taxpayers are apparently paying for, because we have policies on the bus where students, if they are misbehaving, they're supposed to be reported to the principal, and then possibly the next day be kicked off the bus. And instead now we're making taxpayers pay for bus monitors instead of holding them accountable. It's just at the point where the standards you guys are held at, we're not held at. I made the motion to do the study, and it was said to the newspaper that they didn't know why, when in fact it was right on the meeting that there was, you guys, I think it was Southampton had, a third-party, organization come in. And I think it was Southampton had a parents' night for the parents to be able to come in and know what the organization was about. I think it was it Safe Haven? Yeah. And when we requested, why is it, because a parent from Southampton sent it to me and said, you know, this organization, it might be helpful if you guys are aware of what they do. You know, some people are okay with it, some people are not, but, you know, this is the information we got. I reached out to Meredith and said, you know, maybe we should have a parents' night for Seabrook. And I was told, if administration feels that Seabrook parents are entitled to that, they can have that. And at that point, I realized, you know what, why are our parents, or if, let me get that right. If Seabrook parents, if that's something they feel Seabrook parents need to have available to them, or whatever way, and at that night, I realized, you know what, like, our parents not being held at the same standards. I mean, we have students that are in trouble at 11 o'clock, and we're getting phone calls at 2:30 in the afternoon. They could be heard at 11, but the parents aren't finding out till 2. And it's just, I don't know if the focus is on every other school, so now Seabrook is kind of, I can't explain it. I can't.
Is that the concern, like if you were your own, it would be handled differently, is that the thought?
Yeah, we'd have more control, where parents would be more aware, parents would have more say. Like, our parents have no say. We've had parents come to school board meetings and stand up there and basically beg for what they want. And the next meeting, they come again, the next meeting they come, and we sit there and it's, and then when we do voice something, you know, you guys have a lot of stuff going on in your school that we don't. I think all of you, most of your school students went to the State House, stuff like that. Ours kids haven't gone since COVID. Like, the things that you guys do that are based on academics, our kids haven't even had a chance to do because they're so still focused on everything else, that our kids are still learning socially, emotionally, how to adapt at school. And I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but I'm saying that our kids are so behind. And they're not being held at the same standards as the other schools, and we keep hearing it's demographics, it's demographics. Okay, well, that's fine, but our kids still deserve to be taught in the same aspect that you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I was an employee
Yeah.
in Seabrook, so I completely understand that. I guess I'm trying to rectify, like, I mean, it's already been done, like, you've already put out and you're gonna go through the study. I feel like there's power in numbers and ways for RSAU to support all of that, and I hear what you're saying, because no one should be coming from Seabrook to join a fall sports team and not able to access sports, which might be one of their only motivating factors. Like, we should get some clarity on that, because if that is the case, we would figure that out. And if it is not the case, we need clarity, because I don't, that's a disparity, right? And so there are some things you bring up that I think are worth looking into. It's just unfortunate that to get there, you guys feel like you have to separate to figure that, because I do worry about the ability to straddle the efforts there and then support neutrally the efforts here, right? Because you guys have a lot of feelings around that.
But this has been,
Rightfully
this isn't,
so, as
yeah.
you do. I understand why you do.
So I understand, like, so they were
I'm
all,
just trying to
all of
rectify
you
that.
guys, like, this is all new to you. This isn't a new conversation for us.
Not new for me, but yes.
You know what I mean? Not for you.
Yeah.
But, you know, to me, it blows my mind that we're all sitting here and that the questions are coming to us now, because, you know, you guys are all busy. You can't listen to all our meetings. You know, we haven't listened to your meetings until recently. I think a couple of us have listened, and we're like, oh my God, why are their meetings so different than ours? Yeah, ours are chaos. There is a lot of, you know, disagreements. I mean, this board has no say on anything. You know, I mean, I've refused to sign off on invoices in the last 8 months because there's money being spent that we didn't approve. There's positions like bus monitors in the budget that we didn't approve. And now all of a sudden today, we get an email from all the employees that they're not gonna get paid because the board didn't sign off, and we have employees hating us right now, all because administration didn't wanna say, yes, this is invoices for this. Or we have employees being paid $4,000 every 2 weeks, and you ask, why is this person, who is this person? They're telling me it's for this person, but I have an email in front of me from staff saying she does something completely different. I'm not signing off on that. I'm sorry, I'm not putting my name on something that doesn't make any sense to me until you can clarify that. We've had this whole entire election, we have been like, the worst people in the world for not approving social workers, yet we asked administration, I don't know how many times, to give us information on how many students she sees and give us the numbers for the billables. They didn't give it to us. I'm sorry, I'm not approving a position for $157,000 when you can't show me what she's doing for services for students.
So I'm gonna,
So can I just
Sure, I'm done.
piggyback really quick? I just wanted to piggyback though, because I want them to hear the board and how,
Okay.
I'm new, and Kelly's been here for a while. I just am new to the board today, but I was on the Seabrook School Board and Winnicott for 9 years prior to that. I worked with Leslie. Leslie was a part of the withdrawal in Hampton. You were still living in Hampton though, right, at the time? Yeah, so you probably have a little information on it, but I can tell you that the two main drivers of Hampton doing that was academics and cost. And I know your towns, I'm very familiar. We're having kids leave the Seabrook school and they're vouchering into your school. Okay, that's where they're going. And the parents have spoke at meetings and said, hey, our kids are a year behind. They're going in there, they're 2 years behind. So my scenario, I said to the board, I said, we've got to do something, because what if 100 kids leave Seabrook School and they're trying to go into all your schools with all the struggles that they're having in academics? We need to do something on our end to help them, because throwing them all over to you is not going to help your school and your kids either. So we need to do something. So I don't know if you all understood that piece, that kids can go to any school within our districts. So as far as the
Can I just
withdrawal,
clarify that? You
No, they
can't.
can't.
You have to go where the town that you lay your head is where you have to go to school. You can't travel with an SAU.
you can't, well, how,
No.
well, you,
It's not.
no,
Not
that's
unless
not
they
with
break
our
the
school,
law
so
and they're
that's
gonna be
something
sued.
else you don't know.
Not
Because
unless-
they absolutely have been.
there,
And
So you
they've
can
been,
go under ed hardship, there's a few different
That's right.
policies.
Or if they break the law and they're gonna get
Yeah.
sued,
So
then they'll talk us
hardship.
into letting them go to
But
the
as a
school.
regular occurrence.
so yes, they can ask to go, and we have that
Okay,
little
through
clause in there, cause I looked at the words, and it said clearly, or other reasons, something like that, so it put that loophole that makes it difficult for all of you too, because you're not expecting an influx like this either, so we're trying to take care of it on our end. But as far as the vote to withdraw, Hampton did the same thing. And I think I might have been on the joint board back then, and I don't remember ever this conversation about how can you be supportive of our SAU 21 and be supportive of maybe we need to withdraw or not. But our people in our town said they want to explore withdrawal. We have to support that. As far as, we can't go against their vote. We have no power to do that. So as far as me, we're all exploring, we're looking out for what's best for the kids, because that's our job. That's gonna be my job as a school board member, academics. And I think you all, if Hampton Falls today came out with a test score of 16% proficient in math and 34 in reading, would you guys be okay with that? And I can tell you what, Hampton, packed gym, when the academics went down, they had to have police officers there with 300 or more people in the school raging because their kids were doing not well at all. So we're trying to be a little proactive with that and get things back on track, because kids have to be
I don't think anybody,
educated.
and Maria, I don't think anybody here is questioning your motives at all. Nobody's questioning
No.
that. Seriously, we're all, you know that. We're not questioning that.
I know
The
you
only
are.
thing we're questioning is that this is your turn to be the chairman. So if it behooves you to take it next year and let whoever's supposed to be the vice chair be the chair, if it was gonna be too much for you, or you didn't feel like you could do it in a neutral way, that's all that this conversation was about. It's not, we all know how you feel and what's going on there. That wasn't it. It was just whether or not you felt you could handle, be that. And you've said you can, and that's all we needed to hear.
For sure.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie to you, I thought the same thing as you
Yeah.
today.
yeah,
I felt the same thing.
Yeah, 'cause
I
it's
don't have a
hard,
problem
right?
passing it off.
yeah. Well,
Just
and
either
that's,
setting
and
an
that's, I guess, what
agenda
we're asking
still
is that,
feelings
because
Right.
if you
And-
can't do it with, because I know the feelings are there, right? And
Oh,
we
they're
know
there.
that. We know that, and we validate it. Trust me, everybody here does. We sense the frustration. So we're just, our thought was maybe we take that off, this instant part of it, and have you vice and just swapping this year, if that's something that you wanted to do. But if not, it's fine, but we just wanted to give the option. Do you know what I mean? Because we
It's
know.
up to the rest of the board. I mean,
So I'm gonna
wanna be
reopen
the
a call
chair.
for nominations.
I'm not wanna go there.
Yeah.
Who is currently up to be the vice chair? Are they
Vice
chair?
Southampton.
Southampton is the vice chair.
no.
So is there a possibility to
That's,
You take
switch,
any
if
nominee you
you
want,
guys
right?
were thinking like
board
switch it to have you be
has
vice and
policy.
have them be chaired for this year, is that something that has to be made a motion?
So,
Yeah.
Is that
the board has a
possibility?
policy, you'd be voting to waive your policy, which is attached in your agenda.
I got no problem swapping.
I have no problem.
I got no problem swapping if it works, and we'll vice this one.
Yeah.
That works
Switch it
for us
that way?
too.
Yeah.
You guys
Okay.
with that?
That's great. So then I'm gonna nominate Eeny,
Smile if you
meeny,
wanna make
Becky.
a motion.
So,
I was gonna say
Oh,
Becky.
first, yeah.
I was gonna say Becky.
Like that one? I love that.
You are the most senior person.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Alex is too new.
First we have to make a motion to overrule our policy.
yeah, so I would
correct?
suggest you make a motion to waive joint board policy A001, chair rotation.
Right, that. I'm gonna make that motion.
Okay, I'll second.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion?
Do we need to add in there that we would, are we, can I clarify something? Are we adding in there that next year, because next year is gonna have two different boards' names on it?
Yep.
So are we adding in that it's a postponement, or are we readdressing
Right.
next year? I don't know if that has to be a part of the motion.
We can motion again next year. I think this year we just deal with this year, and then next
down
year,
with
cause,
whatever.
cause it'll depend on also what you guys find out, right? So,
But Seabrook was vice chair, and if they're vice chair again and then chair.
then they'd be, then we can motion it next year to have,
To go the other way.
yeah, go the other way.
I have
yeah.
no question
Then are
at
we
all.
So that's-
skipping
Go counterclockwise.
for this year?
Yeah.
And it's gonna be Southampton and the other next town and
As vice or?
As-
vice chair?
Well, we
and
do,
next
for this,
board?
I think for this year, I think if we should stick with 1 year at a time and do it
So-
this year,
So right now,
It would be
the
one
motion is whether or not to suspend the policy.
right?
Right, and then you will appoint a chair, and then you can appoint a vice chair, right? So if you want to specifically designate in the policy which districts are serving, you can do that, but right now I think you're just voting to suspend the policy.
Yeah. Okay.
I just meant to.
As far as suspending the policy, I have Leslie making that motion and Wendy seconding it.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, just to make, should we have it clear that it's just 1 year, or we just do this,
It-
we don't have.
You
to-
reorganize every year.
Okay.
I don't think it's needed. Okay. So we have a motion to suspend your policy on joint board chair. All those in favor?
And can you keep your hands up until I at least get a, so that looks like it's you,
Nope.
No,
I have,
I'm
So-
just gonna abstain from the vote,
and Maria, you're choosing to abstain.
yes.
Are there any no votes?
I don't see any.
Any other abstentions?
me.
You can quickly
Okay.
nominate someone else.
So that policy has been suspended, so now I will call for nominations for the role of
I
joint board
nominate
chair.
Becky as chair.
Second.
Trying to avoid that real quick.
Jen,
She's gonna run a good fast
Becky,
meeting.
do you accept?
Get the second, Jen?
Jen.
Kill us.
This is for Becky?
Yeah.
Discussion.
But, yeah, Becky, do you accept?
Please.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we have a nomination for Becky Burdick to serve as joint board chair for the 2024-2025 school year. Is there any discussion on the nomination?
But you're gonna move over
Yeah,
there.
you'll be there.
Yeah, just stay there, yeah.
It was predestined.
Any
All those in
discussion?
favor?
All those in favor?
Becky, you have to vote for yourself.
She doesn't have to.
Abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
Okay.
And I vote Jennifer Hubbard for vice chair.
What?
So,
Oh my
that-
god.
Second.
Hang on, it's Becky's meeting now.
Oh, sorry, Becky has to wait.
That was,
Sorry.
that's
Wait,
karma
I have to
right
do
there.
that? Oh,
No.
You have to run the meeting now.
For crying out loud.
So now you need nominations for vice chair. You can sit here if you want support.
Yeah.
Or
Can we support each other this way?
you can stay right there.
All right, perfect.
I can support you.
So are there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Jennifer Hubbard for vice chair.
Second.
Okay, are you yes or
Love
no
you
or
dearly.
abstain?
I'm knowing. Knowing myself.
I'm making a motion for the vice
I'll
chair to
accept it,
run
but
the
I'm
meeting.
voting for it.
Vice Chair.
Is there a second? Yes, we're good? Are we moving on?
Yeah.
Moving on. All right.
Public comment.
Public comment. Is there any public comment? I would say no. Do we keep it open?
It will remain open
It will remain open.
for 30 minutes.
For 30 minutes.
So 6:56.
6:26 right now.
She's always the public comment timer, my girl.
Okay. And next on the agenda, we have the NHSBA training.
Yes, so Will Phillips and Barrett Christina are here from the New Hampshire School Board Association, and we appreciate their coming out.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. For those that I've met before, Will and I have come back every year for the last number of years. Nice to see everybody again. And for the new board members, congratulations on your election. Maria, nice to chat with you again. It's been a number of years. So. I want to thank the SAU 21 Joint Board for having us out again. I'm Barrett Christina, our staff attorney, Will Phillips. We're going to do about an hour or so on just sort of a refresher on some of the roles and responsibilities training that we've done in the past, and then Will is going to give just a really brief overview of sort of the right to know law and some electronic communications tidbits and recommendations for boards relative to email use and social media use and things of that nature. We have about an hour. You still have a full agenda, Meredith. After this, there's an hour work for everybody. We'll try and be respectful of everybody's time. Anything less than that, it may be a little bit too quick. But we'll try and get you back on task with the timing and whatnot. So, the other thing that I do want to mention too, Meredith, if you haven't or Rhonda, get us the email addresses for the new school board members. We'll get you on our mailing list. Primarily, we have probably 10 or 12 webinars scheduled between now and the end of the school year. So we want to make sure that board members have an opportunity to take advantage of all those. Right to know law training, a couple of the roles and responsibilities. We're doing one with the Department of Education on something, I don't know what, it's on the calendar. And we've got a couple other sort of third-party vendors that we work with that are coming in as well too, and special education, effective meetings, and so on and so forth. But if you haven't been getting our emails, we'll be sure to get you in our system, and you'll start receiving those soon. So, jumping into the slides, I don't know, do they have copies of them by chance? In Board Doc. In Board Doc, that's right. I forgot you guys use Board Doc. So, I'm going to work through the slides. I'm not going to go through them sort of word by word by any means, but this is intended to be a guide. These aren't like marching orders. These aren't edicts from the state. These are more sort of best practices that the School Boards Association would recommend relative to your governance responsibilities, primarily on your local boards, and then sort of discuss that and compare and contrast a little bit with some of the superintendent responsibilities, and then talk about in what I call the middle there is sort of where best practices come into play and good board superintendent relationships come into play as well too. So, moving on, I'll start getting to the slides. So I have to point it at this thing?
Nope.
Oh, it's the bottom one. Oh, okay. There we go. Gotcha. Just some of the topics that we're going to cover, sort of core principles of school board governance, talking about the domains and between the school board governance responsibilities and the superintendent's management responsibilities, core responsibilities of the school board, policy, budget, and a couple others that we'll go over. And then Will's going to handle some of the right to know law stuff and some of the communications, electronic and other and practical tips. The first core principle, there are three core principles that NHSBA advocates relative to good school board governance. I'm going to walk around a little bit, folks. I hope you don't mind. I work better when I can move around a little bit. The first one is the purpose of school boards. This is RSA 189:1-A. And when I say RSA, I presume most, if not everybody in the room knows I'm talking about the state statutes, right? There's a statute that specifically speaks to the responsibility of school boards. And the first statute within RSA 189 says it shall be the duty of the school board to provide at district expense elementary and secondary education to all pupils who reside in the district. That's why school boards exist, to ensure, I mean, we already had a conversation about that tonight, didn't we? School boards exist to make sure that the kids in your community are getting an education. And different school boards have different ideas as to how that's done, and programs and budget and staffing and so on and so forth. And that's all well and good. That's why we have multi-person school boards, to get a variety of ideas and to discuss through how best to make that happen. But I put this first because I want whenever school boards have a tough question before them, and they're not sure how to vote, and they're not sure what this might be. And we understand at School Boards Association you have a lot of constituencies, right? You've got the public, parents, taxpayers, elderly, the select board, the Department of Education you got to deal with, a lot of different constituencies. But when you got a question and you're not quite sure, how do I vote on this? What's the best thing to do? Always boil it down to how does it impact kids? How does it impact kids? And then use your best judgment going there. But provide an education to the kids in your community. First primary role of school boards. The second core principle, balancing or understanding the difference between collective authority and individual authority. School boards can only act collectively. The 3 or 5 or 7 of you at a duly called meeting under the right to know law, right? Discussing, deliberating, and then ultimately voting and taking action. There's nothing in law, there's nothing in statute or Department of Education regulation that talks about the authority of an individual school board member, right? It always talks about the board. The board shall do this, the board shall adopt a policy, the board shall offer these curricular offerings. So, you know, as an individual board member, you don't have any specific authority. There's exceptions to that. You know, the board, via policy, the board can give, say, to the board chair certain authorities to be the spokesperson, to sign documents, consult with the superintendent on setting the agenda. But again, that's the collective of you giving authority to one individual board member. And so again, I think I touched all of these. Some boards can delegate, inherent authority, at duly called meetings, collective body. The third core principle, governance, not management. As I mentioned earlier, the school board governs the district, and the superintendent manages the district. And the way I conceptualize that in my own way of thinking is that governance is when we get to the sort of key roles and responsibilities of the board. Governance is setting policy and setting budget. Administration, the management aspect, is sort of the day-to-day operations of the school district, making sure the buses are running, making sure the boiler is working, making sure that staff are fulfilling their duties, making sure there's compliance with federal law and special education, a variety of other things in RSA 194-C:4. And I don't know if it's in the packet, but if you look at that statute again, 194-C:4, it's a laundry list of things that the superintendent is responsible for, and they're really sort of the day-to-day operations of the school district. This phrase in red is one that we like. It's not the school board's job to run the schools, but rather to see that the schools are being run well. And we'll talk about, when we get into the core roles and responsibilities, about the board's oversight responsibilities to make sure that the superintendent and the superintendent's team are on task and doing their jobs in accordance with state laws, in accordance with your own local policies, and so on and so forth. All right. Talking about the two domains, we've talked about some sort of maybe aspirational aspects or philosophical aspects of school board governance and administrative management responsibilities. Let's look at the law. What does the law say? This is where we like to give examples of where it's not just NHSBA saying this is best practices. There's a statutory and a regulatory reason behind this. So management services, superintendent. Each school district is required to employ a qualified person to provide superintendent services. Superintendent services is sort of a term of art. in some of the, in many of the statutes, and we've got some of the statutes listed there. Small school districts, is not necessarily pertinent to SAU 21. I don't know the population size of your districts, but some districts, if you've got a small number of kids and only one or two buildings, you can have a district administrator. We won't spend any time on that. RSA 194C4, we talked about that. And to look at Department of Education Rule ED 302 and 303. Again, for the new school board members, if you see ED in front of a series of numbers, that's going to stand for Department of Education Rule, where they sort of fill in the gaps relative to what the statutes say. And there's a ED 302 talks about the duties and responsibilities of the school superintendent. Department of Education Rule 303 talks about the duties and responsibilities of the school board. And most of those are policy making that we'll get to. Department of Education Rule 302.01, they use the phrase executive officer who performs all the administrative and leadership services, and those services are further defined and directed by the governing body, meaning you adopt policies. And I'm sure that the returning board members, you're familiar with your policy manual, it's 3 inches thick. For the new school board members, I don't know if we still hand out hard copies of those in the 3-ring binders. No, save the trees. Take a look at it online. Take a look at policy section. Do you use our coding system?
Yes.
Look at section B as in boy. That's the section that talks about basically self-governing policies. Boards that address how the boards. We talked about it already. We waived the policy relative to the election of the SAU chair tonight, but. Spend some time looking through policy in section B and what it says about board governance and how the board's going to operate. And then other specific duties, back to the superintendent, specific duties enumerated in statutes. That was a weird sound. So a couple more concrete examples. What's that? That wasn't me. Was that you?
It was me.
I thought it sounded like static or something like that. I apologize. I did not mean to call anybody out.
That was nice of you to say something.
I thought there was like static coming through the mics or something. I apologize. Still a weird noise though. Anyway, I think I just lost the room. Some concrete examples between the sort of difference, but yet the corresponding interplay between governance and and management. Department of Education Rule 303.01 says the school board shall adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate the employment, evaluation, and dismissal of teachers and other employees. It's a long way. In a lot of words, are saying you got to have employment-related policies, right? Correspondingly, Department of Education Rule 302.02, the superintendent is responsible to direct and supervise the work of all employees of the district or districts within the SAU, and shall have such powers necessary to make such direction effective. So the board governs its personnel through its policies. That gives the superintendent his or her marching orders. The direct and supervise is pretty broad, and among other things, give the superintendent authority to make assignments, investigations into complaints by staff, by or against staff, and it minimizes, cross-purposing and conflicting directives. Meredith gives a principal a directive. We can't have the school board necessarily giving the school board or the principal a directive as well too. If you're not happy with that directive, you have a conversation with your superintendent, maybe in non-public session. You review your policies. You take a look if anything. If Meredith says, "Well, I was acting in accordance with policy XYZ," the board says, "Well, we're going to revisit that. Let's put it on the agenda or send it off to the policy committee to take a look at it and get administrative input and talk about how this happened and why this happened and what we might be able to do to change course." And it preserves the independence of school board members for quasi-judicial hearings. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. One of the prime reasons school board members should keep an arm's length away from employee matters is if that employee is entitled to a hearing before the school board, whether or not it's a disciplinary matter, a termination, a non-renewal, You may be sitting as judge and jury, where the superintendent comes in and makes her case as to why this employee should be non-renewed. The teacher, if they're tenured and non-probationary, as an attorney can come in and make an argument before the board as to why he or she should retain or keep his job. And then you sit as judge and jury. You have to make a decision relative to that person's job status. If you biased yourself by getting involved in an investigation or whatever it might be, you cannot fairly sit on that tribunal, if you will, when you're determining that individual's rights. A couple more aspects, just to drive the point home about personnel hiring and renewals. Again, we've got the superintendent's responsibility, the school board's responsibility to adopt the policy, and then the superintendent is responsible for nominating all certified staff and appointing other employees. And here's the magic language that we see in a lot of the Department of Education rules. The superintendent isn't just doing that on her own. She's doing it what? In accordance with state law, rules of the state board, and school board policies. That magic language. If you don't like the way it's happening, the policy is your tool to make a change. Professional staff, just to sort of, or when we say certified staff, we generally mean just some clarification. Certified staff, a person whose position within the school district requires certification from the Department of Education. Teachers, principals, librarians, guidance counselors, and maybe a couple other ones. The superintendent nominates and then renominates professional staff. I imagine you'll be doing that in the next week or so. And then the board can hear certain non-renewals and has decision-making authority relative to the superintendent's recommendation for dismissal or non-renewal. And just to clarify, the difference between a dismissal and a non-renewal, a dismissal is where that employee has done something egregious and you want that person out of the building right now. A non-renewal is when they're not being offered a returning contract, either poor evaluations, budget cuts, there may be a handful of different reasons for that. So you're finishing out the school year, but you're telling them by April 15th that we're not offering you a continuing contract for the following year. Just wanted to clarify those two differences. Keep back on time. Fiscal responsibility and fiscal oversight. So the school board, again, on the left-hand side, is responsible for adopting policies, again, getting back to policies, to control and effectuate the purchase of equipment, supplies, or services, and may delegate to the superintendent to make financial commitments in accordance with such policy. So again, you've got finance-related policies, purchasing things, your money policies, right? And also prepare an annual budget. We just got done with annual meetings 2 weeks ago, I guess. Correspondingly to the superintendent's responsibilities, is responsible for the selection and purchase of textbooks and all other supplemental materials, the magic language in accordance with the policies of the board. Further, superintendent is responsible for developing and recommending to the school board an annual budget, in accordance with local policies. So, and then page 12 and 13 of the roles and responsibilities handout, is that in there, Will? Or is that?
Yeah. So they have the larger handout.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Yeah, and it has, I think it has the full rules and the full statute that I've referenced a couple times as well, too. All right, this is a little hard to read up on the screen. This is a chart that we'll put together, just sort of identifying the school board's role on a particular topic, and then also identifying the superintendent's role within that same topic. And I won't go through all of these, but policy and decision-making, school board meetings, fiscal matters, curriculum and instruction, student services, personnel, community relations, labor relations, support services, transportation, IT, food services, and legal responsibilities as well too. I think this is a pretty handy chart that we're trying to work into more of our trainings. We used to have one that I annexed from my good friends in Idaho, but we figured we'd make our own at this point. All right, core responsibilities of school boards. I'm going to hit a couple of these. I'm going to pass it off to Will to handle some of them as well too. So the current version, this current training document is probably about maybe 7 or 8 years old, and we always tweak it, but the generally the current iteration is about seven or 8 years old. I think I redid it like 2016 or so. And then Will's come in and made a handful of changes as well too. Other core responsibilities, just, we talked about the regs. You're primarily a legislative body. By legislative body, we mean you're doing, legislative functions. Adopting a policy and adopting policies is a legislative function. You hire the superintendent, and we talked about what's the oversight. To make sure, when we said that the school board's job is to see that the schools are being run well, not to run the schools. Your oversight is evaluating the superintendent. And we don't have to have a long discussion on this, but do you have a process or a system that is doing that? You do?
We're reviewing it tonight.
You're reviewing your eval. Good. I'm glad to hear that you're reviewing it, just because the one thing that I've seen over my years that it gives school boards such a challenge is the evaluation. You get new board members, on and off the board. This is a large SAU, so you've got 5 different school boards that Meredith has got to be responsible for, and are the goals from the Seabrook board similar to the goals of the Winnicott board. There's a lot of factors that go into that, and I get emails a number of times a year. Do you have a template or a matrix or a rubric that we can use? And I can give you all the matrices and rubrics and whatever else that I can find, but in my opinion, the best evaluation systems and processes are developed locally, because the same matrix that I give here in SAU 21 is not going to be the same matrix that you're using in Colebrook, right? It's different needs, different desires, different communities, different constituencies. But I'm glad to hear you've got a process. None of them are perfect, I'll be honest with you. That's why I think they always need to be tweaked a little bit. Moving on, though, I'll move off of that. Go ahead, Will.
I just want to apologize for that yellow highlight. It's actually highlighted to remind me to change it. So go back in, the one that has the red numbers has the correct things.
All right.
I apologize for that.
Thanks. Oversight from reports and policies relative to the evaluation and process and summative standards of the district. The other thing too that I recommend boards do with the superintendent evaluation is don't just do one formal summative eval in like May. I don't know how many new board members we have on the board, the 21 of you if I'm not mistaken, or how many school board members?
23.
23. I don't know how many are brand new, who's only been on the board for a week or two, but if you're doing that in May, just picture a 5-member school board, right? If they had 3 school board members and a single district SAU, if they had 3 new school board members get elected in March, how can those people possibly evaluate the superintendent in an April or May timeframe? So it should be an ongoing process. If you have questions or concerns about something that is coming from Meredith's office, do not wait until her evaluation is up to let her know about it. Call her, send her an email, say, hey, let's get together for a cup of coffee. There was an issue at the school. I'd like to have a conversation with you about this for 45 minutes. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Meredith, but I'm sure she would find time to do that. Yeah, don't, go ahead, Caitlin.
I just have a quick question. If we're looking at making investments or kind of working through it over time, are you finding that boards are typically relying within the board to get the feedback and make decisions about within superintendent's evaluation, or are they reaching out to buildings, administrations, teachers, and collecting casting a wider net? What is more common?
Yeah, I think, and this is just purely anecdotal.
Yeah, you were talking about time of year.
So I think the majority of boards still keep it kind of internal.
Yeah.
But I will say, even just say over the last 10 years, I'd say, more and more are doing maybe not a full 360, but a modified 360, where they're talking to staff and administrators.
The interactions just vary greatly.
Yeah.
So I was curious. Okay.
Yeah. Will?
One problem that boards that do try to expand that process that they encounter is that the people you're most likely to get a response from are the ones who.
I was going to hit that.
I'm fully aware of that.
But it goes beyond that,
Yeah.
because it creates a public record that then everybody wants to see. And typically what'll happen is the board, somebody on the board will take the information and aggregate it. But we've had situations where the right to know law request went in that little gap. And you know, now you have to turn it over to your attorney and figure out, you know, what needs to be released. So you have to, you just have to take that into account when you're considering that kind of a process.
Yeah, like, as Will said, if you're putting out a district-wide survey, 90% of the people that are gonna reply are only the people that bitch and, that have something to bitch and complain about, and you're not gonna hear from the other 80% of the people, so, yeah. But like I said, over the last 10 years, I've seen more and more doing at least a modified 360. That's just like, again, my own anecdotal, so. I always tell too, Mary, like, talk to your colleagues about what they're doing, and is it working for you, is it not working for you, is it, you know. All right, moving on. Other core responsibilities of the board. We talked about making policies. I won't belabor that anymore. Other than to say, I think there are about 75 policies right now, excuse me, that are required by both state and federal law. When I started at NHSBA almost 20 years ago, it was like 50 that were required by both state and federal law. So every year there's just more and more policy requirements, We tell boards, to the extent you do or don't, again, we don't have to spend time on this, but get into either a policy committee or get into some sort of constant review of your policies. We generally recommend that every policy should be reviewed at least every 3 to 5 years. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to spend an exhaustive time in the board reviewing it, but somebody should be laying eyes on it. You know, is this still current practice? Is this still up to date with current law? Is this really how we're doing or how we're operating? And then if not, you know, delegate it off to a policy committee or whatever it might be. Set and establish a budget and provide budget oversight. I mean, your budget is a policy as well too. It's you know, what do the voters I'm just going to pick on Winnicott, what do the voters in Winnicott want to spend their money on? Right? You've got a beautiful facility and a beautiful auditorium and beautiful ball fields here. At some point, the voters in the Winnicott community chose to fund this, right? I presume there was some building aid at the time, which we don't have anymore, but anyway. And I presume too, I remember talking about this last year, you get, you know, monthly expenses from Matt in his office or monthly reports and signing off. There was some conversation about the manifest earlier tonight, so that's your level of budget oversight as well too. Mindful of the time, I'm doing pretty good. Other core responsibilities: assure strong channels of communication through a comprehensive communications plan. You know, the one thing that we found out during COVID, right, was that parents wanted information, right? They wanted it now, and sometimes what we were able to tell them at 9 o'clock in the morning changed by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so that may not be the best example because that was very issue specific, right, about masking and social distancing and transportation, and are we going to let my kid take his mask off and run outside in the ball field for a half hour and see his friends and so on and so forth. But you know, just, you know, is it crisis communication? Is it a monthly board monthly letter, board newsletter, something along those lines? Do you have a spokesperson in case, you know, the building catches on fire? Who knows what? Again, communication plans, communicate with your constituents. The other thing too that I'll mention, it's easier now than it ever has been to communicate with people. How many of you, the first thing you do when you wake up is look at your phone, and the last thing you do before you can go to bed is look at your phone, right? And we know technology is advancing, and our parents, you know, our parents communicate with their phones. We don't put letters in backpacks anymore, do we? And send them home for them to get the field trip, you know, permission slip or whatever it might be. I'll move on from that. Participate in negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. Meredith tells me that a couple of contracts passed. Just you know,
one last year, one this year. Okay,
alrighty. And the last bullet point: develop long-range plans and attainable short-term objectives. Sometimes this is called strategic planning. The law doesn't really require specifically strategic planning. That's what we generally call it. Do the boards have strategic plans?
So we just updated our portrait of a learner.
Yep.
We just goals,
Yep.
and they'll be doing school-based.
School-based goals relative to Portrait of a Learner. Gotcha. It's similar, I mean, yeah, they can call that a strategic plan. Alrighty. I'm gonna pass this off to Will now to talk about sort of the quasi-judicial responsibilities.
One thing before I move on to that, I just follow up on the thing about the 360 evaluations. One way that districts, of course, the person who asked the question is not in the room right now, but one way that boards can sort of minimize that risk I talked about is to just use multiple choice questions. That, then okay, so the numbers might not look great, but at least there's not confidential information that you have to sift through.
Right.
Barrett had talked a little bit about earlier, the reason why board members, one of the reasons why board members sort of stay out of the day-to-day operations relative to supervision of employees is because that's your quasi-judicial function, which is completely different than your legislative function. When you're in the quasi-judicial function, you're acting as judge and jury, which means you're the one who's responsible for providing due process to the person whose job or attendance at school or what have you, might be a manifest hardship case, that type of thing. But you're the one responsible for due process for that individual. And so when you think about due process, what are the real basic things that we expect in due process? One is a fair and impartial judge, and the other one is the ability of that person to hear the evidence that's being used to make the decision. So when you as a board begin to interact with somebody who's got a complaint, the more information you get, the more you are detracting from both of those. Because number one, you can't remain, it's harder to remain fair and impartial if all you're doing is hearing information from one source. And then secondly, the person whose interests are at stake is unable to hear what is being told to you, and that information might not actually be presented at a hearing because it was inappropriate to be presented at a hearing, or there really wasn't any corroborating evidence. Doesn't mean that you have to be ignorant of what's going on. The same rules that apply to Manchester apply to Hill School District of 30 students. And I can guarantee you that every school, all 3 school board members in the Hill District know everything that's going on. But what you can't do is insert yourself into the process of acquiring information. You might passively hear it from somebody, you might hear it from your kids, you will hear it from your kids. But you can't go out looking for the information. When you get the call from the parent or another employee complaining about somebody, all you need to know is enough information to pass it along to the superintendent and to probably your school board chair. And the reason for that is for just accountability. The superintendent can make sure that it gets processed where it's supposed to be processed, which is usually at the lowest level, whether it's the teacher or the principal or what have you. And the chair, just because it may be something that's so important that the board at least needs basic information about. The other thing that you do with that telephone call that you get, or that you get encountered in the produce aisle or at the T-ball game or what have you. The other thing is know offhand what your complaint policy is. It's ours is KEB. That's the one for complaining about individual students or staff. Know that just know it, know where you can find it, be able to describe to the person how they can get it, because that's the thing, that's the roadmap for them to begin to resolve their process. So you're not just saying, sorry, not my job, you're giving them the direction and the assistance to go back and really address that problem in the best way. And then as to the kind of information you get, some things are, 3 state troopers showed up at the high school and dragged somebody out in cuffs. Probably you need to know, a little bit of that information. You don't need to know exactly what happened or who the witnesses were or what was found, but you do need to be able to answer a question if somebody, you know, your neighbor asks you, or you get a call from a reporter. Oh, we're aware of that situation, the board has, you know, has taken into account, the administration is handling it and will be addressed, you know, according to policies and state law. You know, but not, oh my God, what happened? And definitely no comment.
The challenge is though, right, the board members are always the last to know. Everybody else in the world knows before the school board members. The kids know, it's on social media 2 seconds after it happens, and you're always the last to know, right? Like Will said, you're walking to Hannaford to buy milk or buy dinner, and somebody comes up to you and says, what happened at the high school today? I have no idea what happened, I just got out of work, right?
And that's actually, you know, communication has made it much easier for important information to get to school board members from, you know, schools a little more quickly. But, you know, I had this similar training last night and said, you know, everybody else in the community is gonna know more about it than you are. And I don't mean just the day it happens, but everybody else is gonna be digging and, you know, asking their kids and asking their friends. That's what you can't do. And even if you are able, you know, just because you're that kind of person that you can remain fair and impartial, the easier it is for an attorney to point and say, look at all the things that this person did, they can't be impartial. The longer that process goes, the more your attorney's fees are. And the worst case scenario is a judge thinks you couldn't be impartial and overturns the board decision, sends it back, and it's 2 years after.
Right.
Half of the witnesses are no longer in the school district. So you just, you know, it is something to be very careful about. Doesn't mean you have to be ignorant, but just take yourself out of that conversation. Okay, so now we're turning the page entirely, and just some, you know, a responsibility of the school board is hold meetings in accordance with 91A. And, you know, that sounds rather simple, but the definition of a meeting in the right to know law kind of makes the idea of easy communication sort of counterintuitive of, you know, how the two things interact. So let's just basics. All meetings, things that are called meetings under the right to know law, are open and public in that they're required to be open to the public. Non-public sessions are parts of a public meeting for which the board is authorized to go into a private session and exclude the public from the discussions and the decision making. One of the handouts you have is a right to know law resource package. The first attachment in there is actually a 2-page document that is a script for how to go into a non-public session, how to come out, how to seal your minutes, what the proper reasons to go into non-public session are. So it's a handy thing to have available to you. More often than not, probably the vast majority of time, your non-publics are going to be sort of pre-scheduled and you'll have them on your agenda. But the fact is that at any point in a meeting, if something comes up and a board member believes that that should be a non-public discussion, you can make a motion right then and there. It doesn't have to be on the agenda. The easiest example is, maybe you're talking about a contract for, the plowing the driveways, and it just seems like an ordinary, we're gonna approve the contract, but one of the board members knows something very, nefarious about the person who's gonna be providing the services, and you're not gonna bring it out in public. You're gonna move to go into non-public under reputation. You go into non-public, and what I would suggest is anytime somebody makes that kind of a motion, somebody else should second it. You go into the non-public, you discuss right away, why are we here? And the board can decide, yeah, we don't need to be in non-public. If you don't need to be in non-public, get out of non-public. But don't let the cow out of the barn and then decide, oh geez, we should have been in non-public.
Right.
Let's see, okay. So 91A32 is the exclusive list of reasons for non-public. When you read that list, if it's not on that list, you can't be in non-public. There's another thing called a non-meeting. It's not called that in the statute. Rather, it's an exclusion from the definition of a meeting. So in a lot of respects, it looks like what you would think is a meeting, but because it's excluded from the definition, we just all call it a non-meeting. I'm not gonna cover those in detail, but there are 4 situations. The 2 most common are consultation with counsel. So if your attorney comes to, talk to you about something, some type of litigation, you can go into a non-meeting, have a non-meeting. You could do that by telephone, you could do that by Zoom, because all of the rules that apply to meetings don't apply to non-meetings. Makes sense. And the other one is collective bargaining. So both the negotiations themselves, but also the board's discussion of negotiation strategy, the board negotiations team caucusing about what's going on in the negotiations, all of those things occur in non-meetings. They don't need to be posted and so forth. Okay, so a meeting occurs when 3 things happen. A quorum of the public body convenes. Your school board is a public body, your SAU board is a public body, but all of your board committees are also public bodies, and they need to conform to these same standards. Quorum of the public body convenes in any manner in which the participating members are able to communicate contemporaneously. Telephone, Facebook messaging, text messaging, you name it. Email. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's not whether you do communicate contemporaneously, it's whether you are able to communicate contemporaneously. So the fact that, a 3-member board and one of the board members doesn't say anything, or 2 of the board members don't say anything at the meeting, doesn't mean the meeting didn't happen. It's just that the 2 members didn't say anything. They're able to say something, they just chose not to. And then and we'll talk a little bit more about email and other digital communications a little bit later. And then the third indicia, for the purpose of discussing or acting upon something over which the public body has basically jurisdiction. Anything that has to do with your school district, your students, your employees, all of that's going to fall within the school board's oversight. What if you're on the athletics subcommittee and you got a quorum there, the meeting hasn't really started yet, but you start talking about, the food service? That's not your jurisdiction because you're there for athletics. But if you start talking about the quality of the football field, that can only happen in your duly called meeting. Communication indicia, so that's the second one, includes all digital communication. Pretty much the only thing that I can think of that doesn't need the contemporaneous communication is snail mail. But even snail mail, even going to one person and then another person, then another person, or sending an email to one person, then sending the email to another person, sending it to the third person, those are considered sort of an attempt at end arounds, and those 2 would violate the right to know law. So if you're doing it for the purpose of not doing this, then you're actually doing this. Let's see, no substantive communications among a quorum outside of a public meeting, non-meeting. So administration information, okay. Information can come from the administration to you that you cannot transmit to administration, or at least among a quorum. An individual board member might be able to communicate with administration, but let's say administration sends another type of communication. I'm going to tie these 2 together, I promise. Another type of communication that is okay among a quorum is really a ministerial communication. So something happens at the school board needs to have a special meeting, administration or even the chair sends an email to the rest of the board saying we need to have a special meeting. It's about the thing that happened in the high school. Everybody knows what happened. When can you meet next week? You could do Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And then everybody answers appropriately, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or all 3 or whatever. But then somebody says, we should have got rid of that person 3 years ago. Okay, now you've interjected a substantive communication into what previously was just a ministerial communication. So from the superintendent, she can pass on information that you can't transmit to a quorum of the board. If that happens, well, you know what, I'll skip to the I'll cover some of that when we get to digital communications, which is probably the next slide. Nope. So if it constitutes a meeting, so you have those three indicia, and it's not a non-meeting, you have to have public notice of the meeting. Thing to call out here is a notice is not the same as an agenda. So the notice is hard and fast. You have to have the time, date, and place of the meeting that's about to occur. The agenda is not required, but how does the public know what you're doing unless you tell them what you're doing? The soft spot is, what happens if you post you probably have a notice the statute only requires 24 hours, but you probably have a policy that says you want your agendas done, 4 days in advance or something like that. What happens if something happens in between those 2 dates? Does that mean you can't talk about it? No, of course you can. If it needs to be talked about, it needs to be talked about. And so you have that ability to adjust your agenda, add things to your agenda. But just keep in mind that the more important the issue, the more you want to make sure the public knows you're about to talk about it, because you're going to hear about it from the public if you do something important you forgot to tell them. You're going to hear about it anyway, but so law does not require that the agenda be posted. Don't need to get too far into that. Other requirements: have a quorum, physically attend. So you have to have at least a quorum in attendance at the physical location at which the public can attend. There are some minor allowances for remote participation that we won't get into. If you want to hear all about all the details on these, we've got 3 Right to Know webinars coming up. Next thing you have to do is provide opportunity for a minimum of 30 minutes of public input on school district matters. There's a lot of different ways you can interpret how that works. Yours is one of them. You're allowed to apply reasonable rules as long as they're fairly and consistently applied, and so they apply to all members of the public, not just the ones you like or the ones you don't like. You have to deliberate and conduct all votes openly unless a non-public criteria applies. No secret ballots. So it was good to see that when you did your nominations and your voting tonight, you did that publicly, because that's actually one of the places where boards sort of forget that rule. All of that has to happen in public, so good for you guys. You have to allow non-disruptive video audio recording, even in secret. Basically, if somebody wants to stand back there with a big 1975 video cam, they can do that. What they can't do is come and stick it in the speakers' faces. So non-disruptive, they're allowed to do it. They can even hide it in their coat. Doesn't mean board members can do it in a non-public session. Non-public sessions are just that. There's no recording. You need to make appropriate minutes of the meeting, and all of your non-public sessions have to be in compliance with 91A2 and 91A3. So there's your meeting requirements. And then sometimes this is where I have to, Barrett always says, you guys, you have these communication devices, you can just communicate.
I don't say that.
No, well, but you do have those devices, but as a school board member, it brings a lot of problems in lots of different ways. So we've already talked about the fact that digital communications can trigger the meeting definition of the Right to Know law. And so if you have a quorum involved in a digital communication about a substantive matter, that was an illegal meeting under the Right to Know law. And they can sneak up in the weirdest places. So Facebook comments. You've got the community page, and somebody says something totally, not a board member, somebody from the public just says something totally ridiculous that didn't happen at the board meeting. You were all at the board meeting. So one of you comments. Let's say you have a 5-member board. One of you comments. And you know how those pages work. All of a sudden, 2 hours later, there's 480 comments. So one of you comments. 10 minutes later, another one of you comments. Didn't even know that the first one commented. And then 10 minutes after that, a third one comments. Well, you just had a quorum of the board weighing in on substantive matters. We haven't had a case yet where the court said, yeah, that's a violation, but it seems to meet all of the criteria, and the Supreme Court in New Hampshire has been very clear that unless you can find a reason why it's not covered, it's probably covered. So just some different best practices and so forth. Use a district provided email address or device for all your communications, including district business or about district business. Don't use, yes?
I was just gonna weigh in on that briefly. We've had some situations where people have been using their district email for personal pieces, and when we've had right to know requests, that can sometimes be subject to being released, so just a note of caution.
We advise boards that anything on the school district server or email address is likely to be subject to public disclosure.
And having represented districts for 20+ years before I came to NHSBA, let me just say that sometimes you don't want your Christmas list seen by the school district's attorney. Just saying.
Right.
The corollary to that is don't use your district, so that was that part. But put all of your district business on your district email, district device. Just because you put it on your private email doesn't mean it's not discoverable, doesn't mean it's not subject to the right to know law. If it triggers, if it's a school, if it meets the definition of a public record, and that's for another day, if it meets the definition of a public record, it doesn't matter whether it's on your personal cell phone or on your personal computer or you used your own address. And the last thing you want, using the same idea, last thing you want is the district's attorney saying, hey, I need your laptop, we need to go through it and look for things that meet these discovery requests. So just keep those two things separate whenever you can. Going to some of these are rather random, the reply all. So you've got a email from a member of the community, they send it to all of you and the superintendent and the governor and the president and the attorney general and everybody else. The best thing you could do, some people feel like they have to personally acknowledge that they received it. That's okay. Received it, I forwarded it on to the superintendent who's responsible for those matters. You should also contact the principal of the school. Same as when you got the phone call. But if it went to all of the board members, really what you want to do is just, are you responding to this chairperson or superintendent? And just one is going out, so we don't have, if there's a discovery request, we don't have to go look for, 6 of them. We only need 1 or 2 of them.
And you need a single message.
Yes.
You got to have a singular reply. We talked about collective authority versus individual authority. You can't give that constituent can't receive 5 different answers from 5 different school board members about, oh, I'll look into it, I'll take care of it, oh, that's not my problem, oh, call this person. They can't, they got to have one singular response from the person's inquiry.
And then on the, don't use reply all. So person sent it to, everybody on the board, and you as a board member feel very strongly that, yes, this person should have been gone 3 years ago, and you want to make sure that the superintendent is aware of your feelings on that position. Okay, fine, you can tell the superintendent that. You personally can tell the superintendent that, but you cannot use reply all. Let's see. So if you're the one who's sending an email for, because there's a reason for it, which I don't think there is, but you're sending an email to the full board, the chair is the one most likely to be doing that. If you use BCC instead of CC, or instead of sticking everybody's name in the address line, it removes, or it minimizes the risk that somebody accidentally hits reply all. I'm sure, all of us who have used email have done that. Oops, I didn't mean to send it to everybody. And then when you do have that type of, communication where, for some reason you are sending something to the entire board, and there are some informational things that from occasionally, again, if it's ministerial and it's not something on the school board's agenda, there might be occasion to do it, but I can't think of one right now. But put a notice on there, this should only be discussed at a school board meeting, do not reply to this, or something to that effect. You know, I've seen some people always put it on, like, on their signature line. Don't do that, because people become blind to it. You know, you never read those things. If it's something that is really something the board shouldn't reply to, you're the chairperson, put it at the top in bold. And, you know, it just calls attention to it, but if you do it on every email, it just becomes part of the background.
Last slide, folks.
Yep. I think we did pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay. Never use digital communications to communicate confidential information. That should be easy. You probably do have a, you know, lockdown version of your board docs that allows you to do that, but, you know, even if you're communicating to the superintendent via email, you're not using names, you know, just keep the confidential information off the digital communications. Did that. If a board member, so you're not the chair, if a board member has something for the board to discuss, check your agenda policy that's in the B section. Our sample policy has, you know, board members have a right to put something on the agenda. So if it's something that you want the full board to discuss, follow your agenda policy, gets on the agenda. Doesn't mean the board has to talk about it, because the board can immediately table the conversation. You know, I want all the 5th graders to have tuba lessons. Great idea, but nobody else thinks so. Just move to table it, move on, don't waste your time. Just some other, you know, other pieces. Be mindful of your digital footprint, all discoverable and often subject to right to know requests. Some town just had a internet log history you know, check for the last 4 years or something. So, you know, what you put in there is, unless you have a really good retention and removal process, it's there somewhere. Don't comment on community social media, and don't allow public comment on private social media. So there's two places where social media, you know, it impacts your view of school district work and what you're doing. You know, I probably, you know, more than half of you, if we ask, you know, why did you run? Well, I think, you know, board should communicate more and be more transparent. And then you find out that there's limitations on how you do that, and there's problems when you do that. So first, the community social media, you know, really don't do it. But if you do it, really limit yourself to you're pointing them to a specific thing. Oh, there's a school board policy on that. It's policy KEB. You can find the budget blankety blank. We approved that policy at that meeting. You know, you're pointing to them you know, specific. The last one is, if you feel the need to share board information or district information on your own personal page, don't allow public comment. And the reason is because you will get harassed, and you'll feel bad about that, and then you'll delete it, and then somebody will claim that you violated their First Amendment. We did just have a sort of favorable decision from the U.S. Supreme Court just 2 weeks ago, saying that, you know, you can violate it, but not as much as, you know, people would hope. So we still don't know what the floor is, but why would you want to find out? You know, you don't want to be the named defendant in a 1983 civil rights violation of the First Amendment case. So that's right to know on digital communications in 20 minutes.
Sorry.
Any?
This is Becky's texting me about legislation, sorry.
Anybody, I'm gonna close public comment at,
Oh, it was 6:57, I let her know.
oh, okay, perfect.
I told you.
Yes, no, or what?
That's okay.
Okay.
Or I was saying, or now, since we announced it. That's great.
Whatever you wanna do. And is there any questions for the gentleman?
I just have a quick question, and I know we're over time. One thing that I'm still always trying to figure out around is, like if you're at a public event or you're on a group text that has nothing to do with school board, but there's school board members on it. We're a small town, you know,
Right,
like if
right.
we're on the PTO together, or if we're, our kids play sports together.
So when I had the four,
The three of them are you're at the Christmas concert together.
Yeah,
you're at the
well, it's like,
soccer
I don't
game
think we're
together.
supposed to stand
'Cause you
together.
just have to be,
That's weird.
just try and be extra mindful not to talk about school stuff. It's just, you just keep it in the back of your mind. Since you got elected, you used to be, Wendy is your name? You used to be Wendy around town. Now you're a school board member, Wendy, right? Right? That's how everybody sees you. Whether or not you're at, you know what I'm saying, though, whether or not you're at
Yeah, it's different,
Hannaford's
yeah.
or the concert or the T-ball game,
Right.
people are viewing you as a school board member now. So just, you you gotta be mindful of, just really try, and if anybody calls you out on it, you just say, we're talking about the ball game with our kids here, we have social lives too.
There's actually there's a provision in the statute, when I talked about the non-meetings, things
Yeah.
that fall outside of that. So remember the piece, the third indicia was for the purpose of discussing or acting upon school business.
Right.
So a chance social meeting where the intent wasn't to do it and you didn't do it.
Right.
So I call it the unintentional and the inadvertent. So if you accidentally mention something about, the football field looks terrible today, hey, we're not supposed to talk about that today. So but if you're talking about it 20 minutes later, then maybe it's not inadvertent anymore. But
Gotcha.
yeah, so there is a provision in the definition of a meeting that accepts out that type of thing.
Okay.
So the problem is we have the same 5 people in our town who volunteer for everything.
Yeah.
So
We're like the three of us are on
We're all
it.
like there's
I asked
yeah.
about it already and I can't do the raffle.
Yeah, so
You can't do the raffle?
You're on?
so you
Wait, what does that mean?
So one thing and this relates to what Barrett was saying is, it's not just Wendy, it's they know all of you. So if they see you in a cabal, you might as well have cigars and be in the back room, right? You're making decisions and the public doesn't know. So you just want to just be mindful of that perception. Don't all go out to the same restaurant together. Maybe just not invite the one you don't like. Or something.
See? But there's no conflict of us serving on a PTO type thing.
You mean all together?
Yeah, I mean, we're,
Yeah.
like I
Maybe
said,
not
there
together.
are 5 of us in town who volunteer.
You should be very, very careful.
Okay.
That's all. You have no official function when
We
you're
don't like, I mean,
Yeah,
as
I'm
much as
on
there's
the
that, we
board, I'm
don't
on
talk.
PTO board, you guys aren't, but you volunteer for all this
We
stuff.
volunteer for
talk
things,
about
so
stuff.
that's, okay.
So just,
Yeah.
be mindful of public perception, be diligent and disciplined in, how you communicate with each other. Because even if you're not doing it, you don't want people
The
having the
perception,
perception.
yeah, I guess that's my
Yeah.
question.
So just wear PTA hat, not Seabrook, the school board hat, have different hats when you go to each thing, so, yeah.
That one's the
right?
hardest.
Yeah.
So those are people to volunteer.
That's it.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Any other questions?
That was my big one, thank you.
Maria?
Just have a question, invoices, for instance. If we, as individual board members, because we're all supposed to do everything as a board together, but when I'm signing my name to invoices, just a quick question, I see a big amount of money and I say, hey, I really don't see enough information to understand what that payout was, and I'm a little bit concerned, is it a grant, is it budget? So we have to sit as a board and vote to ask the question to get the information from the SAU, or as a board member, should we be able to send a message to, say, Matt, for instance, or the superintendent, and say, hey, I really don't understand what that is, it didn't have enough information in the description, can you send back and tell me what was that? Is that not okay to do?
No,
Because in
I
Seabrook,
think you
we're
actually-
not doing
If
that.
you need a clarifying question about budget or special ed, I think it's reasonable to email the SAU staff, copy Meredith so she knows,
Okay.
But no, especially if it's finance related.
Matt loves to talk about numbers.
Well.
He loves numbers.
Example, for instance, I did
Yeah,
send,
if
and ask
it's
for some
related to-
clarification so I could
If it's
sign it,
related
but
to-
I was kinda told it takes up a lot of time and that we shouldn't
Well,
be
So I wanna
doing that without
clarify-
the vote of the
Mindful.
board.
Go
So
ahead,
the
Mary.
difference was a question for, can you give us some information of documents that you have on file versus can you add this all up, give us a cost per person that was involved in the activity, right? So,
Just let me give you an example. So, yeah, if you have Matt, this invoice came through, I'm not sure what this is for, can you please explain to me what this is? And Matt will get back to you when he gets your email. There was a board member in a district, this is going back probably 8 years or so now. This board member and her husband would not, I'm trying to say this diplomatically. This board member and her husband were being overly difficult about every dime that was spent. The business manager could not do his job because he spent 5-6 hours a day doing nothing other than to respond to this one board member, to the point where the rest of the board, it was a 9-member board, the 8 other members of the board adopted a policy saying anytime a board member wants to request something, it's gotta go through a right to know law request. Right, so it was documented, and we don't wanna get that far, obviously. We're not doing that to our own board members. Just, be mindful and respect the fact that if Matt or the special ed director has to go to Meredith and say, Meredith, Maria's requests are costing me 5 hours a day, just respect the fact that Meredith's gonna have to tell you that at some point.
Yes, she already did. I asked for an invoice and I already got
So
told you gotta have,
You have
but-
23 board members.
yeah,
And if each of you, ask 5 questions a week,
Yeah.
you basically have to hire somebody else
Exactly.
to fill in the places. So, the best thing is to figure out a protocol.
Yeah.
That, send me 1 email a week with your 8 questions and really be mindful of what that means. But if your question is, am I entitled to information just because I'm a board member, the answer is no.
Right.
It's good to give it to you because it's important for you to do your job.
Right.
But you don't have the ability to tell Matt, I need you to take the next 2 hours to,
Right.
reconstruct this for me.
Well, if we don't feel comfortable with the information we're
Yeah.
given, why should we put our name on the dotted line?
I-
Do you agree? Would you sign something that you don't agree with?
I'm not gonna answer that question, but,
Yeah.
That's an internal question that needs to be, not just for a lawyer to answer, it's an internal question that needs to be resolved between the board
Exactly,
and the
and it
central
will be.
office.
okay,
but
Because that's the
yeah.
issue.
Okay, well, I can't fix that.
yeah. So thank you, and then just one more question. So, from the community, and Leslie, you're on the Winnicott board. So, we've been concerned about say for instance, the dropout rate.
Yeah.
So when I ran for Seabrook, a lot of people said, hey, how are they doing up at the high school? And for years, we would always know that because it was presented at the Winnicott board, so we would know. And I think it's been like 3 months just trying to get that one thing because it's important to all of us to know how our kids are doing up at the high school. So now I'm a board member, and how do we go about being able, is that again internal that we need to take the
Sure.
vote to be able to have that information?
Sure, so I'm gonna answer your question, Maria.
Thank you.
It's not specific to SAU 21, I just wanna get that out there.
Right,
We're hearing this, we hear this a lot from districts that are either in a co-op, we wanna know how our kids are doing, or kids that tuition, they have an K through 6 school and they tuition, and sometimes the receiving district, I know it's a co-op, but the district that's taking them in, so sometimes it's either they don't disaggregate that data, or it's hard to get that data. I tell all my boards right now, if they have kids coming in via tuition agreement or whatever, find a way to satisfy the people in that town and get them the information that they're doing. So, if the Seabrook School Board wants to take a vote to direct Meredith to provide academic information, data, reports, numbers about the Seabrook kids. I mean, she probably can't get it to you by 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
You know, I don't know how I don't know how all that stuff's run, all the
Yeah.
DOE reports and
We
everything.
meet
but-
monthly
Not
usually.
What's that, Meredith?
I just said it's not disaggregated by town, so
Okay,
it
so,
takes
but- okay,
manual
so-
manipulation of the data and.
Yeah.
So I was
But you
wondering-
could explain that to the board, that how, what data
Absolutely.
and it's not necessarily that you're withholding data, it just may not be available. It may not be something that is run in either the state system or a local system, but you can ask for it, and if Meredith can get it to you, she will. If she can't get it to you, she'll explain to you why.
Yeah.
And we did discuss that at the last meeting,
Yeah,
that
how
they
did
came
that
out.
go?
It came out in the last meeting, and there's very little difference in dropout rates in all of our sending
Oh,
towns.
good.
So
so
that came out,
that's the information.
yep, and that came out last meeting,
So,
so.
I just wanted to follow up, so when Meredith says that, you know, we don't, the systems you have don't disaggregate the data, the boards have to say, well, then we need to put more resources in either personnel or software so that we're able to do that. But the resources don't grow on trees. Those are things that you have to put in your budget, or you have to decide that you want to reallocate from your approved budget. But you can't just, you know, magically make things appear that don't exist.
Thank you.
Anything else? I know you have more stuff, but our time is your time. We're happy to answer any more questions. 30 seconds. Yeah, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate the invitation. Meredith has my cell phone number. She knows how to get in touch with me. If anybody needs to call, follow up, or whatever it might be, I don't want to throw more work Will's way, but he's often more available than I am. I'm spending about 30 hours a week at the legislature this time of year. So it's often I'm not in the office, and if I'm not in the office, I may not even be in the office the next day because I'm full-time. But anyway, reach out at any time. Our emails were on the slide. Sometimes that's a better way to do it, an email, say, you know, I'm free between at 4 o'clock if you're free for a call, something along those lines. But we always enjoy working with you. We always enjoy coming out for this training on your organizational life. We appreciate your continued membership and reach out as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I did send the notice of all the new board member emails.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm getting them, I've been
Yeah.
pushing them out to the 5 members.
Yeah.
And then once I find out that they're getting them,
Yeah.
I'll stop and sure.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds great. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Next is the joint board public hearing and meeting. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the meetings as presented for January 29th, 2024.
Can I second that?
All in favor?
I got a question, is it open
Oh.
for discussion first, for the minutes?
Who seconded that?
I did,
Lauren.
Lauren, sorry.
I don't see anywhere in the minutes, I had a bunch of comments based upon, teacher evaluations and, the principals that were not getting that completed, and I don't see that anywhere in these minutes. We had a pretty decent discussion on that.
I made a couple comments too regarding Seabrook.
Do we amend that, or do I just not accept the minutes as presented?
Let me find them. I'm trying to log in from here. Oh, Gina, try and make me.
No, this was during,
Was
the-
it during- okay,
yeah,
we're
'cause
trying
it was,
to-
during the professional development plan where we talked about the evaluations of teachers, whose responsibility it was, and ours weren't done, so I asked, where does the SAU responsibility come for holding the building administrators responsible, and there's no.
Sorry, I just know there was a lot of discussion of non-public.
Yeah.
I wanted to be clear, I was pretty sure we didn't have minutes for that. Okay,
I
thank
do
you.
recall that conversation as well, because I think I did make a comment on that
Yeah,
as
there
well.
was,
Yeah.
The
So what are you
board
guys
asked
wanting?
about the improvement plan cycle, if it's used a lot, does it result in teacher improvement or termination? Further discussion around determining improvement plan cycle for teachers if students are not succeeding, how that is approached and addressed in the evaluation. It was noted that it can happen at any point, not just at the end of the evaluation cycle.
Yeah, we don't do like a he said, she said.
Okay.
We do summarize. Is that not enough for you guys?
If that works for
That
everyone,
paragraph
I
right
just,
there?
when I went through, I just didn't see the part of the conversation, but if that's how we put it in, then
Under
that's how we
PD
put it in.
plan.
It's up to you guys. If you want more detail in there,
No, that's fine,
you have to determine that. Somebody's gotta tell me what they want written.
that's fine. vote the vote, the motion that's already on the table. Accept them.
Yes, accepting them, all in favor?
I'm abstaining.
Abstain.
There are a lot, yeah, there's a lot of people I did list it in there, who is present, who's eligible, who's not eligible. Under
So wait, do you want
administrative
the yeses to vote first?
Yeah.
Yes?
contact. You know what, I can go through and read the names of who's eligible to vote.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Because a lot of people aren't on the board anymore.
Because what?
A lot of people are gone.
Right, well, she's got it in here, well, she's
And then the people who were present while Rhonda's getting that ready were Barbara, Becky,
If you read the names, then they can vote for me.
Kelly, Lauren, Leslie, Nicole, Patrick, Tamara, and at that portion, Christina and Wendy. Christina's not here. Wendy also.
So you.
Say them one at a time.
You read those names
I
slowly,
can.
when you read them, they can say
Barbara.
yes or no.
Becky.
Barbara's
Yes.
a yes? Becky?
Yes. Kelly.
No.
Lauren.
Yes.
Leslie.
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes.
Patrick.
No.
Wendy.
Yes. It's school board Wendy now? They gave me a typo.
Sorry. School board Wendy.
So should you want to abstain because you were not present, you were not eligible to vote?
So can I ask a question? Madam Chair?
Sure.
Just a quick one. So where you guys are not, so when Rhonda asked, do we want it more involved, do you want that? I guess is what I'm asking, because I think that's probably why the no vote, so I just wanna make sure that we're doing what
I
you.
just, if this is how we do it, I'd probably have to come up with something that's not off the top of my head right now.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm just.
When I read it today before coming in,
Yeah,
like I said, we had a pretty good discussion on it we had several other board members comment. I just
Yep.
didn't know how that quite translates into the minutes,
okay.
but if that's,
Well, I just think I'm just thinking moving forward, what we all
yeah,
need to
if we
agree to, so if we want.
write every word down that everyone says, we'll have a 3,000
Right.
page.
Right, we don't want
document.
that, but we
A
want,
little bit
yeah, so
more.
There
that's,
was
I
an
wouldn't
issue when
mind
the
more.
newspaper called, and there was information that the newspaper requested, and the information they were given was not accurate, and the comment was that the newspaper is given exactly what's on the minutes. So our concern is that if it doesn't, not with you guys.
no, I know, I'm just saying newspapers, I have never had one quote me right in my entire life, so whether they get what they get is another, but anyway,
They went off
so,
of what the minutes said.
yeah,
According to the law, minutes don't require all the he said, she said. It requires a summary of the discussion and then board action, which is what we,
Yep.
you know, what we.
Maybe-
Okay.
Meredith? I would just say that, I mean, that's also why they're recorded, and those recordings are publicly available as well.
Yeah.
Right.
okay.
So if the board wants
I
to
just,
transfer
I
it.
just was thinking moving
I
forward.
attached that to Board
Thanks.
Docs, so if anybody wants more in depth, they can open up that YouTube link and
Okay.
listen to it.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Anything else? So we have a vote, we're all set? We
Yep.
can move on to, so next on the agenda is the draft communication plan. Yes, so that was shared with the board at your prior meeting. The administrative team spent a little time working with it. We didn't fill in all of the action items because there are differences in each district around what resources are available and how communications are best managed. So you will see those at a building level rather than the joint board level. But what we're looking for ideally is adoption of the broad goals that are outlined in the plan.
So we need a motion to take this.
That would be the ideal.
Is there a motion?
Can I ask a question first? Is this plan being, and I don't, pardon me for opening a can of worms here, but is this being done in conjunction with the PR firm, or is this being done from us?
This is from us, though we have their support to implement portions of it. They won't be doing all of that because we don't spend money to have a full-time communications person, right? They do a very small portion of the lift.
Okay. Is there, I was trying to go back to that original, proposal from them. And is anyone here like tech savvy enough to guide me how I can search back to find that? Maybe I
Yes,
can
we
connect with
yeah,
Rhonda.
I can direct you back to when
Okay.
that was adopted. It's in board docs from the meeting where we adopted it, but we can, I don't
And I remember it being in there, cause I remember
Yep.
looking at it, but I wanted to
Yep.
go back and cross-check it
Yep.
to this.
I will make a note and we will get you that information.
So can I ask one question? When it says provide media community access to schools' classrooms, like, how do you envision that is gonna look?
So that's on our terms, right? So if there's a special event, right, that we think, wow, it'd be great for the public to see some of this, then we work with the media. We make sure there are photo and media releases available for any of the students who would be captured in that activity. And then they would have the opportunity to participate. Sometimes, right, there are certain presentations or events that are large and you want some exposure for, right? You want to be able to share and have your community be aware of what's happening. And so we control media access, but there are times when we'd want to invite them in. There are good stories to tell in our schools.
Anything else?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the draft communication plans as presented, is that right? You didn't put it on there. I know, I'm failing, but that sounds close enough. Does that make sense?
I'll second that.
Can I ask one more question? Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you were still. Why is some of it in red and some of it is in white? Does that have a meaning, or?
Well, I PDF'd it.
There's like different ones that are highlighted red and some are left white. I didn't know if that meant something, like those are
Is anybody
to
else
be
seeing
done.
that?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
pink,
Yeah.
white,
Oh, it's like
pinkish.
Yeah, it's like
Oh.
highlighted in pink or.
Oh, it's
I've
yellow
got
on
yellow.
my
I've
sheet,
got
but,
yellow.
no, it was just to make it more readable.
Oh, you've got yellow.
I have
Yellow and blue.
I have yellow too. It's just to make it more readable, so you could see
Oh,
the
okay, so
different
it doesn't
components.
mean anything.
No.
Okay, so it's not really like every other one.
Yeah.
Not on mine. All right, sorry.
Bless you.
Do we vote?
Oh, yeah, we need to vote on this.
So I have Wendy making the motion and Lauren seconded it.
I have a question, I just have a question. Do I have to ask if there's a vote, or do you ask if there's a vote? Or do I say,
Ask all yeses, any noes, any abstentions.
What's he just said? Can I have a vote? How about,
All those in favor?
all those in favor?
And I'm trying to look.
Any opposed?
Oh, too many jobs for me right now.
Yeah, I haven't had a.
Any opposed?
No opposed.
Any abstentions? Just one? Kelly, I didn't catch yours.
I said yes.
Yes.
I'm supposed to ask that too, if there's an extension?
You're getting
If you want me to, I can ask it, because then I'll know if I'm missing somebody, otherwise.
Yeah, sure, that's a great idea.
I know what, we'll make you chair. How's
Yeah.
that?
Better
Pass
idea.
it over. Let her do that. Make it go quicker.
We're all good with that? We can move on to the next, yes?
Yes.
So we are, policies first read.
Sure, so there are 4 policies in your packet. They are all recommended for withdrawal. The first one is definition of duties. Barrett went over that. That's captured in Law 194C4. So the policy committee felt you didn't need to have that. Superintendent's vacation is addressed in my contract. So again, board policy committee felt there wasn't a need for that. Information in regard to salaries, but there's no corresponding policy with the New Hampshire School Board Association. No one was aware of any history for that. It seemed a little vague. So the policy committee recommendation was to withdraw that. And then the final one was for an SAU vehicle. There are no SAU vehicles, and we don't anticipate having any vehicles, so just seemed like an unnecessary policy.
Motion to accept the withdrawal of the policies.
You don't even need one,
Oh,
just the
wait,
first
read, okay. Got it. So just, now we just move on.
unless there are any questions.
Any questions? No, good, okay. Next is the superintendent evaluation.
Yeah, so I think, Michael, you are the only person who was at the OC meeting when that was discussed. Jill and Christina, I think, wrote a summary overview. So I think 21 of the 22 eligible board members, I don't have it open, but 20 of the 22 eligible board members have participated in the evaluation, and that gets placed on file. And if there's an interest in discussion, that would typically happen in non-public, so.
Okay.
Do we have to do any motion or anything about it, or was it just for discussion?
It just says discussion and information.
Okay.
So it's been signed by the
Jill and Christina.
Jill and Christina and myself, and it gets placed in my personnel file.
Everybody good? If anything, we'll talk about it in, good, yeah. Okay, moving on to the finance report.
Thank you. So I, back here.
Hi, Matt.
So I've included the fiscal year to date.
I don't think Griffin can hear you. Can you come to the mic? I'm sorry.
Your mic's not
The
working?
YouTube viewers.
Oh, press it.
Oh, you have a microphone.
Oh, it was lit up.
You can hear you. Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I have included the fiscal year to date expenditure and revenue reports on board docs. So the last time we met was at our January meeting, and in that time, there's been no significant variances on the expenditure or revenue side. We are currently tracking to finish the year with approximately $25,000 in available balance and $20,000 in surplus revenue. So should that continue, that would result in an unreserved fund balance of approximately $45,000. Now with the SAU, it's a little different than school districts in that the balance rolls over into the next fiscal year. So with school districts, that balance is returned to the town to offset tax assessment. However, with the SAU, it's different in that the SAU is not allowed to set up expendable trusts. So that balance is in essence that safeguard against any unanticipated costs. It's also used for capital projects. So for example, we do have on our CIP for the SAU a planned roof project that is coming up within 5 years. So that being said, I will note that there are 3 months remaining in this fiscal year. So I always make that caveat that, should we incur any additional unanticipated costs or revenues, that could potentially affect that final unreserved fund balance number. So additionally, I just want, I know you are all aware, but we have received the official results from the election on March 12th. We were very happy with the overall results. The majority of our warrant articles did pass, and we are really particularly encouraged by the CESPA CBA for our paraprofessionals passing in all of our districts. This was, I'm sorry you've heard this a million times, but really the last opportunity to just note how important that warrant article is for our districts. And we hope that it will address competitive salaries and benefits to help us to better hire and retain our educational associates going forward. So I want to thank all of our community members who came out and voted. So thank you. That's it.
Any questions? Concerns, comments? Okay, moving to the award of the grant.
Yes, so we received a grant from a new organization called Youth Well New Hampshire for $15,000 to the SAU with the intent to fund parent coaching for every family, staff and parents within our SAU for the upcoming fiscal year. And I want to thank Dr. Toomey for
writing that and pursuing that. We've received good feedback about that resource, and it's new, it's a new tool, but families have had good experiences with using it.
Oh, that's the actual name of the tool, mental health coaching for families? Okay.
That's through the Cook Center.
Parent guidance.
Sorry, Parent Guidance Center.
Parentguidance.org.
Great.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Any questions or comments or? Okay, so now we are moving on to future meetings. So we have a policy meeting on April 30th, the operations committee on May 7th, and another joint board on the 21st. Are we going into non-public?
We are.
Yes. So you need a motion? Take a motion to enter non-public?
To enter non-public under RSA 91-3(2) at 7:56 p.m.
Letter A.
Oh, A. Parentheses A. Oh, man, I'm so close.
Is there a second?
Yeah, Patrick's actually.
This one I do call names because this requires a roll call.
Okay.
Alex Russiger, did I say that right?
Yep, you got it.
Anthony Lang,
Yep.
Ashley Haas, Barbara Goodman,
Yes.
Becky Burdick,
Yes.
Desiree Potter,
Yes.
Gisela Manna, Jennifer Hubbard,
Yes.
Caitlin Belanger is not present, Kelly Huber,
Yes.
Lauren Jurda,
Yes.
Leslie LaFawn,
Yes.
Lisa Gagalis,
Yes. Yes.
Welcome.
sorry, please correct me if I'm
It's
saying
the
your
Galis,
name.
it's the Galis, that's fine. But I'm here and I say yes.
Victoria Brown,
Yes.
Michael Gendry,
Yes.
Nicole Seco,
Yes.
Patrick Knott,
Yes.
Tricia O'Keefe,